Wondering which epic cards to craft? Well, I have some ideas.
Hey buddy, watch this.
Yeah, in fact, I have 10 cards I'm going to recommend that you should craft here at the Epic Rarity in Hearthstone, and this is based on both a combination of what we're seeing in the meta today, but also cards that are going to be fundamentally good for your collection moving forward. So things like neutral cards and classic set cards are going to get a really big bump in this video. I think those are going to be the most important for you to have because they're not going to rotate out, but there are still some cards in rotation right now that are still going to be very powerful pieces for your collection. Now, before I jump into my top 10, I do want to talk about specifically some Rise of Shadows cards if you're looking for something a little more focused on this expansion. But I actually only have 5 recommendations for epic cards. There are certainly a handful of other good epic cards available in Rise of Shadows. I'm not saying these are the only 5 worth crafting, just that these are the 5 I think are the safest and have a little bit more resiliency perhaps than some of the others, which are maybe more focused into a single deck or seem a little risky for one reason or another. So we have Wrench Caliber at number 5, Waggle Pick at number 4, Magic Carpet, Omega Devastator, and Mana Cyclone. And I think you'll see there, Omega Devastator and Mana Cyclone, despite being class cards, still the most influential epics right now in the entire set, I'd say. And in fact, our good friend Mana Cyclone might even be making his way into the real top 10. Yeah, and in fact, he's number 10. Nice big tease there, Regis. You really put some drama on it. Yeah, held us in suspense. 2 mana, 2/2 for Mage, of course, is Mana Cyclone. Big part of all the Mage decks that are all over the ladder right now. These Cyclone Mages, a lot of them running Conjurer's Calling, also popping in a wild format right now too, with Quest Cyclone Mage. And you can see that just across the board, Cyclone is one of those cards that's just good. If decks are using it in both formats, it's obviously doing something amazing. Turns out, generating 6, 7, 10 spells in your hand is a pretty good thing. It's just adding a lot of extra value to your deck and to your hand, and you can play all those really cheap spells efficiently. With things like Sorcerer's Apprentice, you can create some really absurd scenarios and situations. So because this card is such an engine, has so much fuel, I think it's very resilient in Mage, and I think Mage has a great package right now that's probably not going to go anywhere. So despite this being a class card and a rotating card, things that typically don't make these sorts of top 10 lists, I think Mana Cyclone stands out so much that he still made the cut. So now at the number 9 spot, we have Augmented Ellic. This is my first ever card reveal for Hearthstone. I'm really attached to our good friend, the Augmented Ellic. Future Regis might pop in and have something to say about him. But right now, seeing play predominantly in Bomb Warrior, very popular deck, and a really popular card within that too, enabling you to shuffle in additional bombs into your opponent's deck. But despite that, we've seen Augmented Ellic pop up in other decks from time to time too. Turns out this shuffling aspect is really quite powerful if you're building your deck around that. So a card that's not only very relevant today, but seems to have some applications moving forward across the meta as a neutral minion. Lots of different things can utilize this fellow. So even though he's rotating out, in less than a year at this point, nonetheless, I still think there's a lot of life left for the Augmented Ellic. So as we move into the top 8, I'm just going to spoil it now. The rest of this video is all classic cards. If you feel like you have all the classic cards, feel free to stop watching now. Starting off with Preparation, a card that just got nerfed, but nonetheless, I think retains so much of its power level and has been such a staple for Rogue and is still currently being played despite just being nerfed, which is usually when people pull back on cards the most. They still recognize the power level in Preparation, still fits into decks really nicely. So as far as a classic set class cards go, Preparation's really one of the best epics you can get. I've only got one more recommendation I think is slightly better for class cards, which we'll talk about right now. It's Brawl for Warrior, and as much as Prep has been a classic, Brawl has really been the linchpin for so many different versions of Control Warrior decks throughout the year. Still being played a ton today in Control Warrior, one of the most popular decks on the standard format ladder right now. And if you ever plan to play Warrior, this is a card that you just can't go wrong with. Of course, there have been some aggressive Pirate Warrior style things out there that didn't play Brawls in the past, but 95% of Warrior decks use this card across the board. This is a very powerful removal tool, one of the staple removals in all of Hearthstone, so something that you absolutely need in your collection. Moving on here, we're going to jump into the essentially neutral classic card, starting off with the Big Game Hunter, the big tech answer to big scary minions. Another card that has actually been nerfed, but is still seeing some play teched in to answer things like giants that all the mages are playing out there right now. but has been good in past eras of Hearthstone, and I imagine there will be some situations where big 8/8s roam the streets of Hearthstone and dominate again, so Big Game Hunter will always be there to answer them. And even if you don't get a ton of play out of this card like today, right now, it might only fit in 1 or 2 decks at the moment, it's still just something you need to have around for when those moments arise, because it's just going to show up eventually. So now let's move into the top 5 here with Faceless Manipulator, a card which has enabled countless combos throughout Hearthstone's history. Just being able to copy minions always comes in handy somehow or another, whether you're making another Malagos or copying a Leroy or just running this as some kind of value minion. This is the sort of card that keeps popping up in decks that can find creative ways to use it, and that's why it's pretty handy to have in your set. So now we have the Merlok War Leader. And that's all I got to say about that. Moving on, we have Doomsayer. I think this is in the top 3. I don't know. Apparently, I've lost my mind. Doomsayer, the ultimate epic control deck tool. 2 mana, stop your opponent from doing anything, commonly used with freeze effects in Mage, but also all kinds of control decks just like this as an anti-tempo tool. Early in the game, you disrupt your opponent's turn, often stealing a turn from them outright. Sometimes it's just to heal 7 if they are forced to kill it. So it's one of those epic cards that's probably been the most popular throughout all of Hearthstone's history, and it's a great tool if you're looking to play any deck that's slow. So it's something you should probably add to your collection. So now we have Seegiant, and there might be another giant at our number 1 spot as well, but Seegiant has become a really flexible and powerful tool these days where all kinds of different decks can run this thing successfully. You know, Zoo has been running it in the Rise of Shadows meta a lot, Magic Carpet Zoo, but then it pops up in Mage, and suddenly it's really good in Mage with things like Mirror Images, and when your opponent has a handful of minions, and Conjurer's Calling, it's really powerful. And then like Water Rogues are running this card as well, because you can play all these lackeys. And that's been the case throughout many eras of Hearthstone where Seegiant has just popped into a deck. And you know what? I think that'll probably remain a thing. As long as wide boards are good, and they generally are in Hearthstone, Seegiant probably has some place where you create that difference between a wide board and suddenly a really tall minion. That friction between going for a small AoE or a single target removal can be really difficult to deal with. And that's why a card like this one is just so strong, is that it kind of gives you a backup plan, a counter to your primary mode of aggression, and that makes it a really, really powerful asset. And then finally here we have our number 1 choice, the Mountain Giant. And I debated for a long time whether Mountain Giant or Seegiant should be in first place. I think they both have a lot of applications. Right now, I think Seegiant probably edges out Mountain Giant a little bit in this current meta, but Mountain Giant's still very relevant in Conjurer's Calling, Mage, of course, right now. Turns out creating a bunch of 8/8s and 7/8 minions with Conjurer's Calling is a great play, particularly if Khadgar's hanging around. But we've also seen Mountain Giant succeed in a lot of other decks in the past as well. Just getting a big handful of stuff, playing a 3 or 4 mana Mountain Giant's a really big deal. So, you know, even Warlock used this to great success. Handlock back in the day also used this card to great success. And because of that, because there are decks that just like having cards and control decks out there, I think Mountain Giant's a slightly safer craft than Seegiant, although frankly, it's a toss-up. You can't go wrong with either one. They're both giant 8/8 minions that you can cheat out super cheap, and it turns out playing lots of stats for very little mana in Hearthstone's a really good thing to do, and that's why this card is a good craft for you. That rhymed. All right, those are my top 10 epic cards to craft. I don't know why I got goofy there at the end, but hey, that's what it is. So that said, I'm sure you guys have your own thoughts and opinions on the best cards out there to craft that are epics. Please share those in the comments below. Nobody should be listening to just me. You should be looking for second opinions. You should be trying to, scour the internet for all kinds of takes on the best cards to craft. Gather all that information, find something that fits you and your collection, and go for that. Don't just listen to me blindly. That said, I hope this is pretty good and helpful advice. So thanks for watching, and until next time, game on.